Hey homesteaders, gardeners, and cooks. My name is Jennifer. Welcome to Miles Away Farm. Thanks for joining me in my kitchen. Today we are making black bean burgers. And I have played around over the years with a lot of different vegetarian no meat burgers. I've done them with oatmeal, I've done them with lentils, and in general the problem with them is texture. They're just kind of mushy, and that is not what you want in a burger, whether it's vegetarian or not. We're not vegetarian. It doesn't take long to look at my videos to know that, but we do eat quite a bit of vegetarian, and I've been searching for a long time for a good, solid vegetarian black bean burger or any kind of a vegetarian burger that I could make from home. I'm not a big fan of the ones that you buy in the grocery store. They're often made with textured soy protein, and unless it's organic, that is almost 100% assured to be GMO commodity crop manufactured, and that's not what I want in my diet. You do you, no judgment. But I wanted one that I could make from home. This recipe comes from Serious Eats. It's from Kenji Lopez-Alt, who I love. And I've actually had it printed out and sitting in a folder in a 3-ring binder for about 5 years. So I've been sitting on this recipe for a ridiculously long time. I went through a phase where I made a bunch of different types of vegetarian burgers and didn't really like any of them, and then found this one, but I was kind of over it at that point, and so just hadn't gotten around to trying it. It is a couple of jars of black beans, and these are home canned black beans. They're actually from Azure Standard. I grow black beans, but I was out of the ones that I've grown, so this is not my own homegrown ones, but home canned at least. And then it's a little bit spicy. It has poblano peppers in it, and it has some chipotle in adobo sauce. If you've never had chipotle in adobo sauce, this is found in the Mexican aisle of the grocery store, usually somewhere near the salsas. Chipotle is a smoked jalapeno, dried smoked jalapeno. I think most people know that at this point. And then the adobo sauce is a vinegary, tomatoey, spicy sauce that goes with it. It's absolutely delicious. I actually know how to make it from scratch, and I have done that in the past, but that's definitely a 201 or a 301 kind of homesteading level, because you have to grow and get the jalapenos ripe, which are red, and then smoke and dry them, and then turn them into adobo sauce. So oftentimes I'll just buy this from the store, and you can freeze the extra. So a lot of recipes will call for just 1 or 2 of the chilies that are in this can. They're quite spicy, and so you usually don't use the whole can. And then you've got this partial can in your fridge that you throw in the back, and eventually it molds, and then you throw it out. You can throw these in the freezer. They'll last forever, and then the next time you have a recipe that calls for them, you have them. So never throw these out. Just throw them in the freezer, mark it somehow, and you're good to go for the next recipe. And then these are on homemade burger buns, and there's a video that shows how I made those as well. So lots of good homestead stuff going on in this recipe. Let's get started. So you're gonna need 2 cans or 2 jars of black beans. And you're gonna wanna rinse those really well so that the water runs clear. And this is the surprising part about this recipe, and it's really why it works. You actually bake the beans in order to dry them out, because part of the problem with vegetarian burgers is that they're soggy, and this dries everything out so that things aren't so soggy and gives things a little bit more texture. I've got a half an onion here. I need about a cup of chopped onion. And I haven't chopped an onion in a video in a few weeks, and so I always like to show this every 3 or 4 times that I use an onion, just because so many people don't really know how to cut up an onion. You want to leave that root end on, and that holds everything together so that those pieces aren't sliding all over the place, and it makes chopping it so much easier. And if you really want to be fancy, you use this claw grip that I've got there towards the end to keep from accidentally cutting your finger. The recipe calls for a poblano. This is a roasted poblano
that is from last fall that I roasted and then froze. And it's probably about the equivalent of 2 poblanos there, so I just cut it in half. A couple tablespoons of oil in our pan. Let's get those onions sauteing. And then I'm terrible at mise en place, which means getting everything ready at once and then starting to cook. And so while those onions are cooking, I'm gonna peel some garlic. And this is early garlic from my garden. It's very fresh. And I'm letting those onions cook a little bit before adding the poblanos because the poblanos are basically already cooked. And I think the recipe calls for 3 cloves of garlic. These were really tiny, and so I just kind of eyeballed it. And again, because this is so fresh, I went ahead and just scraped out the little bit of skins that were in there because they're just going to dissolve right in this. This recipe doesn't call for carrots, but I had these tiny little carrots that I pulled out of my garden that had overwintered last winter, and they've been languishing in my fridge. So I decided to use them up and throw them in. So I've got a little bit of carrot and 1 tiny beet, totally optional. Probably 2 tablespoons altogether there. Saute that. Let's get our chipotles open. And there's that beautiful chipotle pepper. And I really want this to just dissolve into the sauce, and so I'm gonna chop it pretty fine. If you're really sensitive to heat, use gloves when you handle these, because they are pretty spicy. And then a teaspoon of the sauce that's also in the can. And then while that's cooking, I need some raw cashews that I'm going to toast in the toaster oven. This is my favorite way to toast nuts. I almost never do it in a skillet. And then I'm just going to go ahead and freeze the rest of those chipotles so that I don't forget about them in the fridge. And the nice thing about this is the sauce keeps these from freezing really hard. And so it's pretty easy to get 1 or 2 chilies out of that when you need it, even though it's frozen. At this point, our beans are done. And I probably should have greased that tin foil. They did stick a little bit. So grease your tin foil before you put your beans down. It'll save you a little bit of time. And then you can use either Parmesan or cotija. This is cotija, which is a Mexican dry cheese that's very similar to Parmesan. So we're gonna grind up our cashews, and the recipe is in the description, so all the details are there. And the thing about a cashew is it's such a neutral flavor, and I think that's why it's used as a base here instead of some other nut. Adding in all of our sauteed veg, mixing that together. Adding in our beans. Getting that ground up. And this is pretty dry, so you do need to scrape down the container at least once. And then there'll probably be some additional mixing once you get it out of the food processor, because it's not going to spin real easily. Adding in the cheese. And then we're going to dump all this in a large bowl and add in the rest of our ingredients here. So we need an egg, couple tablespoons of mayo, some panko breadcrumbs. This is the first time I bought this off-brand, Safeway brand of panko. It's definitely not the same as the traditional Japanese panko, but it worked fine. Some salt, some pepper, and then you just want to mix all of that together, just like you're mixing meatloaf. And then this gets divided up into 8 equal pieces. And I found this was a lot easier to work with if my hands were damp. And so I got my hands wet a couple of times while I was doing this. It keeps everything from sticking. And then you want to spray down the tray. Because there's basically almost no oil in these other than that little bit of mayo, they're going to tend to want to stick. And so there's quite a bit of spraying happening in various places in this recipe just to keep things from sticking. And then just form these into patties. This was really easy to work with. Quite lovely. And I'm flipping them once just so there's a little bit of oil on both sides. You guys should be proud of me that I didn't weigh all that out before I did it. I just did it by eye. And then you get your grill going. And again, because they're going to want to stick, I'm spraying my grill down with a little bit of nonstick spray. Basically, it hits that hot grate and immediately kind of volatilizes and makes a nonstick surface. You can also do that with a paper towel dipped in some oil. That was kind of the dramatic way of doing it. Cook on one side. Here's our beautiful homemade burger buns. Recipe in the description below. I'm adding a little bit of extra oil before I flip these. Again, the last thing I want is for them to stick. They held together beautifully. This was really lovely to work with. I've done a lot of different veggie burgers, and sometimes they're crumbly, sometimes they're super soggy and hard to flip because they're not very sturdy. These really held up well. And then I'm just adding some cheddar. Another few minutes. We're just trying to get a little bit of a smoky flavor and some char on these. And then I am adding some beautiful homegrown lettuce to my burger. This is the last of my homegrown lettuce. It's gotten too hot, and so the rest of it has bolted. But this is a butterhead, which I just love. A little bit of homemade ranch dressing. I have a recipe for homemade ranch. It's an older video, so it's probably a little more tedious than most because I've learned how to shorten things up quite a bit in the last year. But it's worth making your own. It's really good, and it's a great way to use up herbs. And then this is homemade barbecue sauce from my tomatoes from 2 years ago, I think. And, you know, everybody does their burger differently. I am not a raw onion person on my burger, but whatever you love on your burger, do that. We tend to be a ranch and barbecue sauce kind of family. And there you have it. Beautiful black bean burgers. And these were really good, you guys. This is definitely the best vegetarian burger that I've made from scratch. Good texture, a little bit of crunch. Really, really good. If I were going to make this again, I would probably double the recipe just to have extras in the freezer. So give this recipe a try. It's worth it. Thanks for watching, Tribe. If you like this kind of content, give me a like, subscribe, leave me a comment, or share. I have new content coming out every week.